Kyle Jones. Today we're discussing the problems of pain, what causes anguish, what causes a type of mania, and what is the correct discourse and course we should follow. So we're diving back into some studies that I did 15 years ago, 20 years ago in the Greek. A lot of the references are vast, but you might look into Plato's work called Cratylus, E.R. Dodds. Those are rational Greeks. These are tremendous works either on the Greek language and culture or from the actual Greeks themselves, and there's no greater mind philosophically, I don't think, than Plato, the early Greeks, early philosophical mind, that is. So last week we were doing a diagram on the prepositions, motions, verbs with motions of God, and I'm going to continue that now. So thank you. I'm Kyle Jones, and we are on our way. So last week we were discussing the toxon, if you will, if I could write out a picture of a man who was drawing back his bow. He's holding his bow, if you will. There's his hand. And there's the strings. I'll give him a good pull here. He's pulling back. He's got his, actually, let me go a little bit higher than that. So he's got his string here. It's being pulled back. And you have your arrow. And we have the intended trajectory straight to the bullseye over here. Here's the bull. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. A few other outer rims of the bullseye, but this is the bullseye itself. It's in a stand, or how do you want to do it? But he shoots here, and his aim, hopefully, didn't follow that the arrow would have been in line. Let me get this one. So that if the arrow would follow, something like that. So he's doing a low rider shot here. So that's the idea. So he pulls, and his arm has to be, if you will, in line. His body, the arrow, the pull, the physics have to be in line with a line that preceded him. You see what I'm saying? That this is an intended trajectory of physics that follows the law of force, and he applies to the arrow, to the bow, and pulling back. And hopefully we'll hit the bullseye. And that seemed like a simple thing, we talk about archery. But let's get to the philosophical idea, the words, the anatomy of this from a theological, philosophical, and linguistic perspective, and cultural perspective. The person who shoots, the arrow is called the toxon. And I believe it is something like, I don't quite know if it's circumflex there or not, but let's just use the basic letters here. Toxon. There's a word that we have called doxa or doxology. You ever heard of doxology, the hymns of praise? You heard of that before, doxology?
Yeah.
Well, doxology, doxa, that's the, if you want to get into the Greek, forgive my trying to not break the chalk, to be honest with you. I believe it's, my gosh, I'm running upside down. Let's get to this one, for the sake of all of us. Doxa, that's an alpha. My fault. I will get this right eventually. Doxa. Delta, Omicron, Psi, Alpha. There's your D, Psi, and everything else is secondary, if you will. That's your square root. Doxa means praise, and doxology means hymns of praise, or whatever, or you can say the study of, for that matter. But doxis means praise. Now, toxon, as Plato said, comes from that word, actually, doxa. The toxon, this man who shoots the bow, will be the recipient of praise, the object of praise, as the archer, as he completes his shot here to the bullseye. Okay? Now, the participation is such a key word here. We participate in the battle that's already been done. We participate in the shot to the bullseye that's already been done in physics, if you will, in the logos, in the ology of the shot. It's already established what is necessary to hit the bullseye. Okay? So, why then, if it's already been shot, if it's already been done, if it already is, that we have an object, if you will, a man who is participating in the subject of the shot that's already done, why does he receive praise? Well, he receives praise because he was the one who fully did his job. He's the one who completely participated in the shot, or in the line of trajectory of the rightness, diake, sune. He was joined in the rightness of it. Dikaya, however you want to inflect it, but diake, if you want to get right down to it, is the word for what is right. So those who shoot the arrow and it misses, they are not in the diakasune of the shot. They did not fully participate in the rightness of the trajectory that hits the bullseye. They are amiss, okay? And that is the word ananke in the Greek. All of these are going to be, hopefully for right now, Greek words. I'll hit a few Hebrew in a second, but Greek words that were used by Plato to express the verbs of motion, the verbs of motion, and the participation of the object put into the subject of hitting the mark. And my intention, why we even do these classes, is not just to talk about, so let's say, archery for today, but to show the anatomy of the will. Are you doing it, or is God doing it? Do we have free will, as we say free will, or is there predeterminism, predestination? Okay, now I said all of these lectures that I've done in my past, I've uncovered 66 terms for the word will. And I've uncovered about 15 for free. Which free and which will are we talking about in modern day America? Which one are we talking about? Which cocktail do you want to create for the word free? Do we make up what we want to based on no reference at all? Or do we go back to the ancient Greeks to understand the etymology, the root of why we even bother to speak? And do we or do we not regard the etymologies as being something of a fixed nature of culture that went into Christianity and was completed into even a higher philosophy? And I would say that Paul might have been the greatest philosopher of all time. And even the early ancients that were not Christian, pre-Christianity, post-Christianity, but post-Christianity, there's no disagreement that Paul was a great philosopher. Before Christianity was Christianity in terms of the sealed, fullness of a Bible, the Antiochus redactions, the Textus Receptus, Paul was still considered one of the greatest minds of all time. So Paul took all of the Platonic ideas of the Greeks, all of the Aristotelian, Plato and Aristotle's ideas, and a lot of the other greater philosophers, Heraclitus, Thales, and he answered to the Greek mind what they were looking for. The Greeks were really trying. In all of the, quote, abstract notions that they had about life, they were really searching for a reality that we could grab some wild thing in our imagination and then project it through poetry or play, drama, or just discussion and see what the animal does. Let's look at the anatomy of that idea. The notion, again, all ideas have consequences is the truth. If you have an idea and it's an idea. That means more than just a fleeting thought, but an idea. That's a construct of thoughts that come together to create something. It will be projected out. It will become a consequence in this reality. And that was why I was discussing with you earlier. I wrote it down that E.R. Dodds discussed about the ancient Greeks as rationalizing an idea and creating it to be an accepted thing within their culture. So you can take anything, and things that might go against nature, and if you accept them, or let's say you rationalize them into some form of thought, poetic thought, dramatic play, a place where it doesn't have to be a reality. And right now, that's to say, when I say reality in this sense, there's many quote, realities or definitions of realities. The sense that we bring a play, an idea, to stage, or to poem, or to poesy, or to music. Music's a good example too. And we bring it to the public, and they buy into it, they live it out. It becomes a type of reality, though it might go completely against the course of nature. The Greek word phusis, and how things really do act according to hidden laws. You know, reproduction of animals, how the trees grow, reproduction of, how a seed has to die, how the stuff of an acorn, what makes an acorn force itself into a great oak tree? It has the stuff, the form of oak tree in the acorn. It's a little nut, it's an acorn. But it has the potentiality, but not yet the reality. Yet, but the idea was put into the form of oak tree that we see only in an acorn. So think about that. We're becoming little gods, as Jesus said, loosing and binding our own laws, binding ourselves to a destruction, fooling people, tricking people into our idea, sending them twofold the children of hell. Twofold the children of hell. There are other ideas that do fit with nature, that do fit with the reality of the phusis in the Greek. And I believe that the early first century Christianity, in the context of the Greek language that they Christianized, not corrupted, but showed how the Greek's vocabulary worked within a system of the anatomy of the will and our relationship between ourselves, our fellow man, fellow sister, with nature itself, and with the God who has the idea that established us as a consequence. Again, think about the acorn, its oak tree-ness in an acorn, and it becomes an oak tree. How is that possible? An acorn is just an acorn. But why are they all consistent? All acorns can create an oak tree consistently if let enough time. What gave it that right? What gave it the oak tree-ness, the suffixual ness? Something of idea that preceded acorn. There's an idea that we're going for. We're trajectorying like this, but backwards. We're going to take the shot and go backwards prior to the toxon into the idea of rightness that precedes even the physicality. Because this requires this, and that required that. Okay? So, toxon, the one who participates at that moment, you might miss it in the next shot, but for that moment, he participated correctly into the shot and hit the bullseye. It is our glory, the only glory that we're going to ever get in this earth and in heaven by God, that we participate correctly with God's motion. Okay? The word Christ, as I've said before, its root, I always use the spirit root, I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but I do it this way. It comes from the old word Greia. I think you could kind of probably put an E and an A, whatever. I think Grey might have been an EI, not quite sure. It's an old Indo-European word. I'm not too concerned with that. You look it up for yourself. But Grey, there's some kind of sound after it. It meant to be fully anointed, People say, "Hold, Christ means the anointed one." Really anointed with what? Olive oil? Anointed with what? And you'd say, "Well, God, of course." Yeah. Good. Who's God? Because that's a German word. Das Gut. That's Goth. Theodoric called himself the Goths because they were of God. That means good. That's a noun. God precedes anything nominal, anything noun all. He is a verb. And he's a verb that causes all things by force to idea to consequence, sequentialism, sequence, going in line, one after the other, precept upon precept, one after the other one. Christ means fully employed. When you get back to the original meaning, it means to be fully employed. To fully have done the thing. Gra does mean fully anointed, fully daubed, fully stained, fully dyed, to be completely overwhelmed, inwhelmed, underwhelmed, overwhelmed, everything, saturation, full saturation. Full saturation, full employment of doing the thing. It was Christ who fully participated in the Father's will, and that word will, as we say will, in our term, and I'll hit the other 14 later, but our term will is the Greek word bole. Right? Bole. Right? Something like that. Bole. And if you look at the ba and the wa, there's your labial. Pa, ba, fa, wa, va. And there's your rotex, la. There's your wa, la, ba, la. It's the same word, okay? You might get the word ballistics, like, if you study the shot of bullets, ballistics. And if you study how the trajectory of a bullet travels, okay? Well, that's it. Uh-oh, how about the word bullet? Again, bullet is just a prefix, really. This means the et, the feminine aspect, something of the volley, the will. But there's your bullet. There's your ba, and there's your la. There's your labial, and there's your rotex. How about if I said volleyball? I'm really being redundant there. Volley, there's your va, there's your la. What does that mean, to volley something? To hit a ball over the net, right? It's on the basic level. I'm volleying the ball over, right? Volleyball. But volleyball is actually saying ball. It's redundant. Anyway, that's what we say, volleyball. If I said to you, I'm going to redo this again. There's the shot to the bowl, something like that. If I said the word volition, I'm saying it is of my volition that I executed that man's death there. Because I'm saying of my own what? Will. But volition, I could say, oh yeah, it's of my own will that I did. Yeah, you have to come to that term. Yeah, well, it's of my own volition that I did this. Volition kind of engages it, in my opinion, a little bit stronger sense. It means I use some of my reasoning. I use my skills to make a decision. Versus just I will throw this ball. Like I will do what I want to do. But they are connected. They're the same word. So you really can't disenfranchise the word will in the sense, I'm going to do what I want to do, from the idea of volition, meaning to have some sense about you, from the idea of bole, because it came from that. And we don't have any strength in these words unless we go back to its root cause. Because where are we coming from? Why do you say the things you say unless you've came from someplace with some point of reference? I love that. Point of reference. P-O-R. Never forget that, because I will use that a million times. What is your point of reference? It was a line in Beowulf, and I forgive me, I forgot who it was. I do think it was Beowulf challenging somebody, but he asked the question, what is the birth of that statement? What is the birthing right of the thing that you just said? And so Beowulf was just asking, you said something, but give me the reason, the root cause, the etiology, the ideology of the thing. Tell me the sequences, the steps that led you up to saying this wonderful thing or this crazy thing. Why would you say that? So again, we get back to the why, right? Not the what you said, but why you said it. Which is more important? What she said or why she said it? Well, you need the whatness in order to make it an objective reality. But it's the why, the idea, the experiences that you can't put your finger on, that person, she, let's say your girlfriend, my wife, brought to the table and actuated it. You know what I'm saying? Made it into a reality. Because she's different than the animals of the field. She has mind to actuate something, to put something into actuation. When this toxon receives his glory because he hits the bullseye over here, that is the word, bulle, if you will, there's your will, and then sty. Well, I'm hopefully I'm, as your printed form of A, listen to me do that too. I think I've taken typewriters to my soul in this one. But bulle means the will, and usually sty, if you means the stand. It means the sticking place of the stand. I remember when in Macbeth, Lady Macbeth was telling Macbeth to find your sticking place, find your bullseye, keep your mark, keep your prize. And we'll discuss Macbeth. We did a lengthy study on Macbeth. That she was telling him, stick to the will of your intention that she already knew was fated by the witches, the fates. Stick to the objective idol, the prize over there. And for Macbeth, because he was caught up in the fates, the three witches, was it Strephocloth and Lachesis, I think. Lachesis being the word luck, the other two being the measurers and the cutters of the cloth. Lady Macbeth was telling him, get the objective prize, though it means killing King Duncan, killing your best friends, and murdering anybody that gets in your way. Like we were discussing before the class, what Satan didn't tell Christ in Christ's temptation was, if you bow down to me, I'll give you all this in this world. What Satan didn't say is, I'll give you headaches, depression, possible suicide, and diseases of all. Come to my system. Get caught up in it, so let it think for you. You participate in my trajectory. And that will lead to death. But this volley of the arrow, it hits the bullseye, the stand, the sticking place. The sticking place of the right perfect shot. Dikaio. I think that's how you can say it. Dikaio. I think maybe that's, I'm going to hack at the word. Dikaio. Dike. The right shot that follows the will of the intention that was already preset before the toxon, the archer, could participate. He participates here. The shot is of his name, his aegis, but in the nomos, or the authority, the law, the Greek nomos, of the math that preceded him. And he participates in that sense, and if it hits the bullseye, it hits the completion of the right shot in its sticking place. Bullseye, have you heard of a word called bullseye? I wonder if that might be the same word. We call it bullseye, don't we? When we hit the mark. Okay? Now, one more thing. Prior to, and I just had a wet rag that would have done me a lot of justice right now. I wonder if it fell into the vase. I wonder if they got bored with this in class. It started to hide. So, watch this. So, volition, will, same word. We'll come back to all this stuff later. Sticking place. Prior to the shot, there's another term that Plato used that we'll find in the New Testament too. All of these words I want to show you that the New Testament, before we even get into the New Testament, we need to read with intent. Okay? We need to be reading with intention. Why are we even reading the Gospels? Why are we even reading Genesis? Because if you don't read with intention, if you don't know the anatomy of the will of God and the participation of you, the Shakespearean play, if you don't know the meaning of why Shakespeare wrote this play, it's so much harder to read the book. Because you've fully exhausted yourself, and you might get a couple of cool things out of the story. You might get, the story itself might answer to the story. But chances are, if you understood why Shakespeare wrote Macbeth prior to Macbeth being written, if you understand his historical sources and what he drew upon and his studies for that, you'll understand when it comes to an actuation, okay, that it will make much more sense. You'll understand, oh, I bet you he's going to write about this. Even before you get to it, you're going to go, I bet you he's going to draw on the Satans of Touch, Seytons. They were the wardrobe specialists that adorned the higher class, the nobles and the kings of Scotland for being dressed. They were called the Satans of Touch. And it's interesting, had nothing to do with Satan, Satan, but Macbeth is so brilliant, he uses the Satans of Touch in the play whenever Macbeth calls upon Satan to arm him to go to battle with those that were coming from the Birnam Wood over the hill to attack him and behead him eventually. And Macbeth said, Satan! He was calling out to Satan. It's a double entendre. He's saying, calling out to the powers of Satan, yet it was historically a family that had been around for hundreds of years that was good at one thing. That was their trade, to dress the nobles, the kings, and to make their clothing and to dress them properly. Isn't that interesting? So you got to know about wardrobes and studying, clothery, and you got to know all that, And so I studied a little bit about that. I like studying about the Satans of Touch. They're the ones who had the proper adorning rights for the kings, and they would get granted certain rights within the king's confine because of that. And so the higher part of that story is that we are adorned with what they call the panoply, or the wardrobe, or the armor of God to go into battle. And so the panoply was called the wardrobe of battlement. And so there's a play on the words as Christians that we adorn ourselves with God, calling on God to go into battle against Satan, if you will. And everything in the play of Macbeth is what we call an antimetabole. It was a reversal of Christianity. And that was another part of the ingenious nature of the play of Macbeth. Everything was in the reverse of God's will and His grace. It was a negative grace and a reversal of will that was given in illusory conditions, or in the illusory condition that Macbeth, you have the will to do what you want to, when he was completely fated to death prior to any of his actions. Ingenious play. I think it was the highest writing that Shakespeare ever achieved. So the Satans of Touch, the adornment. But it was in the, not even how I got there was a reason for it, but prior to the shot, the math is there, the participation of the toxon is this, what we call the rus, and it's called the river or the flow. And it's not, it is in accord with the bolle. It is in accord with the diakosune, or the right thing to do. The rightness meant literally without shadow of turning. It's meant straightforward. It's not just, oh, you did the right thing. Yeah. No, it means you did something in a straight line without screwing around, and you did it, man. You completed the job. You are, in this instance, performing the work of Graia. Christ is the only one that completed the job in every aspect of his life, never missing the mark one time. That's why he obtained the name Christ. That's why you probably don't hear too many people name Christ. Now, Jesus or Jesus is a guy's name. It can mean Savior. It can mean one who brings you from point A to point B. It's a powerful word too. And in one sense, Jesus, it comes from the word Yeshua, which means salvation. But that's become almost marginalized. It's just been reduced to some extent to, a name. Jesus. Everybody's called, and you see a lot of, here, Jesus and Mary. But I think that's more of a Catholic thing in terms of the respect and regard for Mary and her son. So in that sense, the Catholic condition is honorific. I want to name my child under the aegis, if you will, of Jesus, but of the authority of Christ. In one sense, I can respect that. They're giving honor. In another sense, as a Greek mind, I can't do that because there's nobody in my family, including myself, that's ever going to be a Christ figure in terms of doing what the word Christ means. And in one sense, I could never name my son or myself Jesus because I'm not fully salvatorial. I can't save you. I'm not the soterion of your life. I'm an agent participating. I wonder if I could find a word, more or less with the participant of the person shooting, maybe the archer. I don't even know if I could, Archie. I don't know. I'm just saying I would rather do that and give myself or my son's name a name that participates in the greater thing. But nonetheless, this motion, rus, is what they call it, is called the flow. It's where we get our word river comes from that, but river really isn't, I don't know if it's directly, and I could get into the etymology, but the etymology does not necessarily fit with rus. Rus means flow. Okay? The flow, the stream, the river is what we would call it. But it's the motion of many things in context with themselves in a flow that goes forward uninterrupted of itself and by itself. But by itself, of itself, I shouldn't say of itself, by itself in the context of flow, a river follows the pattern of the currents underground that comes up, and it's created a ravine. And that's kind of where we get the word river from. It creates a ditch, per se, that the water flows in that ravine. It goes through a course, and it carves its course. And once that course is carved, the water flows uninterrupted, if you will, in that ravine. It follows its course. So, following the rus, the flow, if you're a kayaker, you don't go against it, you're going to flip the kayak. Anybody who's gone kayaking, including myself, has joined the turtle club, what they call it when you flip it over. And I don't know, it was almost in October, and I was getting too fancy in front of my newlywed, and I flipped the kayak over, and she just laughed. And she tried to help me out, and she fell in the water. It was a big mess. So, long story. It's called Joining the Turtle Club. Funny story. There was a guy on the bank laughing, and I was like, oh man, he's an older man too. And he said, yep, you joined the Turtle Club too. That's where I learned the term from. That was funny. But the rus just means the flow, if you will. Here's a better way to look at it. When you're playing drums, close your eyes. I'm a drummer, jazz drummer. I'm playing with, say, Cliff Richmond or some really good musician in town, and just laughing, enjoying it, almost going to sleep, playing. Everything's just right, and you wake up in 3 hours, and man, everybody's just buddies with you because you had a blast. I was practicing the art of rus. I was in the flow. And really, another word is poesis. I was in the poetry. I was in the poesis means flow as well. It means just getting into it and exuding from the flow words that give the sense to the flow. Poesis or poetry means that to actuate a word, a rhythm, a rhyme to the flow of something. So all these are working together in this tremendous anatomy of this organism. They're expressing the anatomy. We're cutting up, if you will, a greater organism. And if I could, once we're through with all this in 20,000 years, if we had that much time, we could see a bigger picture, and we go, oh, there's your organism of this thing. We're trying our best to get the anatomy of the smaller motions, if you will, something much greater. So, rus is the flow. We're getting in. We're chilling out. We're relaxing, for gosh sakes. We're breathing, and we're using our intellect to make the volition that would fit the relaxed nature that's already established anyway. I was in the Marine Corps. I used to shoot long shots across, fields that had different various conditions, windage, and I had to account for the, rough terrain, smooth terrain. I had to account for windage. I had to account for haze, sunlight. I had to smudge the front side aperture. I had to shoot at night. We used an MPBS 7 Starlight scope to see things at night, long distances away and make shots using tracer rounds. But just shooting, I had an M16A2 called an M16A2, shot a 2 caliber bullet, and we were shooting targets at 500 yards away with no scope. That seems crazy, but every standard Marine that's listening to this knows that. I shot expert. And I shot expert because I followed the rules of Bolet, trajectory, and got into the roost, the flow, the breath, me relaxing, me wrapping up my sling tight. And so I was like, with my body moved, the gun moved with me. And I'd look at the front and the back sight aperture, front sight, rear sight, and I would trust that I had established my sights to meet the standard of the velocity of the bullet, the weight, the caliber of it, the windage, trajectory, the length, the distance, and I'd make my shot. And I used to shoot expert. I achieved expert shot, and even in boot camp alone. So just to say that I obeyed the rules of trajectory. So in a sense, I have somewhat authority to talk about this. Plus I love archery. So I love the way the words fit the anatomy of the motion of shooting something. So when a man or woman are in the flow, in the context of the Bolet, which I just said roost and Bolet in that, if you will, or participates those two words in it, we land where the Bolet would have its sticking point, because Bolet indicates you've already made the shot, or the shot's already been made. Bolet indicates the stand or the sticking place of the Bolet. Now, pain. The problem with pain we're discussing, problem with pain, C.S. Lewis's work, that's a brilliant treatment altogether. I think it would supplement, I'd supplement it, or it would supplement this. What happens when, and I'll be calling back on the philosophers such as Plato on this one. What happens when the shooter whenever the shooter misses the mark? I'm going to rewrite this one. And moreover, why did he miss the mark? There's always intention, and there's always a reason for missing it or hitting it. Now, and before I do this, I want to write out one word. I want you to remind me to talk about this, because this is sheer genius on God's sake, not mine. I want you to remind me of this word, kaseth. Okay? If the shooter, the toxon, who knows as a participant of being an archer that this Bolet, this shot, the shot, if you will, of righteousness, the right shot, the one that is healthy, clean, without shadow of missing, or however you would say it, without shadow of turning. If this participant, this toxon, we called him toxon initially because he followed the Bolet, okay, to the ballista. Well, that's it. I'm almost being redundant. What happens if he knows the Bolet, the will, if you will, of God? He knows the will of God is to hit the mark right here, and he knows his stats on the windage and velocity and the weight of the arrow. And he sees something else, like, say, I'm just going to be silly for a second. Let's say he's an ADHD teenager and he sees a big fat bird he's never seen before. It looks like a platypus and a pelican and a turtle together. I don't know, something stupid. And he goes, dude, look, wow! And he's right in the middle of a let's say a competition here, and he shoots the bird instead. Okay, right? And the bird dies, and everybody screams, and he gets arrested because you can't kill that kind of one of a kind special bird that's now nearly extinct, or now is extinct. But he loves it because it was so fun to kill living animals, because he's an insane ADHD crazy teenager like I was, and I hopefully have repented of killing birds like that, because that's a lot of times southern kids, I can say, I'm sure that northern kids too, but down in the south we had pellet guns and 22s, and you get bored and you want to impress your friends, right? Does anybody else know that story? I don't know. I know I do. I'm a Memphis boy, and moved into Hendersonville years ago, and we have lots of forests and woods, and we just do that kind of stupid stuff. So he decided to not go with the flow that hits the bullseye, because he's in a competition and his parents are screaming at him, "What are you doing?" He shoots the bird. What is a term for this? Well, rus is the flow, the mind, the emotions that are participating in the bolé. What happens to his mind and his body and his emotions when he no longer follows the shot of righteousness, the right shot to the bullseye? He exits himself, and that's the word E. That's what Plato said, that you put an E onto a word, it means to exit something. That was one of its older usages. So he, eros, you've heard the word eros before, right? You've heard the word erotic. There's still your dental, Rotex. There's the flow. He exited the flow. He went outside of the intended good diokosune shot of that which is right to hit the bullseye. And he went for the objective thing that he so panted for. Which came first, his panting or the missing of shot? I think, and Plato said the same thing, you're governed by eros before it happens as a consequence. It starts as intention, as idea, and when it's actuated, it becomes the consequence. Sequence. Con means with, sequence means series of actions or motions or things that get to something else. Now, there's a word for that outside of eros. Eros is the thing that is not in the physical world, that gets into a man and makes him move with motion outside of the flow. Now, is eros always bad? No. Eros in the right confine of, say, marriage. Remember the word gamos in Greek? Gam, to join mentally, spiritually, physically with some one person. When you're joined together with that one person in the context of holy marriage, being faithful to that one person, then in that context, you're safeguarded. You're sealed. And as Solomon said, the bedchamber is open for that. It's like all systems go, do what you want to, because you're free within the system, the bound system of that which is holy matrimony. It's okay to go outside of your mind and talk even with clear sentences or words. And on the ultimate hilasterion act, or the hysterical act in the Greek sense, when you're out of your mind, when you're ecstasis with passion with your spouse, you're no longer able to speak straight sentences, right? Or I'm being silly here, but no, I'm not. You're out of your mind. You're ecstasis. You're outstanding of the sense of being able to talk clearly anymore. But yet you're not dirtied. You're not in sin. But how about if you contract yourself with the world and many spouses, if you will? If you've espoused yourself to many ideas, many people, and you're rent between one person and another person with many ideas, many vagaries of ideas, that's not sacrosanct under God's rule. One wife, one husband. And I think that's established for that very reason, that we would commit ourselves to one person, and in that we're free. But what happens is this archer was bound as archer to commit to the job and to complete it. Remember the word Christ. Grea, gra, Christos, krea, same word, okay? Gara. It meant to complete the job totally. He didn't do it. He didn't fulfill that job. He went outside and shot the chicken. Flying platter. I don't care what it is. He was out of the flow. Now, that again is an idea. It's a motion that precedes the participant. And its trajectory is off the mark. And when you're married, gamos, to the game, when you're married by contract to the commitment of the competition, to your parents, to your friends, to the judges, to your competitors, when you're married to that system, then your completion, your complete nature is to hit the mark. Or at least try. So in that gamos, in that marriage of that social confine, part of your marriage is to be as Christ, to hit the mark. But when you've said, the heck with this system, the heck with this marriage, I want to marry another idea, you follow the thing that preceded you. It governs you. You don't govern it. It's already missed. And these are the laws of hitting the miss, not the mark. Hitting the mark. There's a Greek word called, we all have heard this before, harmateia. Harmateia, I don't know. You might not have. Harmateia means it means sin. Pacunas means sin. So sine waves, actually, talking about signs, the arc of something off is the line. But anyway, what measurements of line. But harmateia means simply to miss the mark. Okay? Miss the mark. It is a Christian term. It's a Greek Christian term. When I say it's a Christian term, I don't mean like it's a Christian bass guitar, or I don't mean it's a Christian wall. I'm saying that it's a word that has become, I'm making you laugh, it makes me happy. It's become a word that has comfitture to the Christian doctrine. Okay? I love it. I love you can laugh. I don't care. I hope that a billion people see this. It's funny. So, what is the word for harmateia, missing the mark, when you hit the chicken? We're going to get wild over it. See, yeah, this could go to total comedy act. It's called ananke. Remember the word ananke. Now, as Plato said, it comes from a root, on, and it means anguish. It means off the mark. And ananke, its cultural definition, meant to traverse the thorns, thicket, bramble, and brush. It means you were in a perfect flow, and you decided to shoot right out of that, and now you're having to go through, if you will, spiritually speaking. Plato said, now we're into the thicket and thorns and brush where you're tearing your flesh and destroying everything that you were married to get that one objective prize in your mind that you projected. You think that that's just as right. That which makes you happy. And I remember doing a study on the word happy and sad. It's a Czechoslovakian word called kov. And it meant to be satisfied now. If I'm a heroin addict and I get my fix, I'm kov. I'm happy. And when I'm happy and I've met my fill, at my mental state, not God's, already being an incomplete man, being a heroin addict, and I'm filled up with kov or kov, that means that's the word, that's the origin of happy. Then I become satisfied with my drugs. Remember the word for satisfy? Well, where does that come from? Sad. And now I'm sad because now that I've been filled up, I'm sad, I am satiated. Remember the word satiate? Satiated. You're filled up. You're fed up. Remember the word fed up. Isn't it interesting that our very words, filled up, don't look so bad, but all of a sudden it does mean the same thing as the word fed up. And now you're sad. So I've decided by my own will, not the will that precedes me that hits the mark, but I've become disenfranchised with that which precedes me, and I've become my own autodeia. Autodeia. My own God. Jesus called the Pharisees autodeias. You want to call yourself gods? Good. Go for it. Establish your own trajectory. Establish your own shot and your own desires. And what you're doing, you're making twofold the children of hell that follow you. They don't have any engagement or marriage with the thing that preceded them in the better shot. They wanted the glory, the toxon, as name for themselves. They wanted the doxa to themselves poignantly, and from them they go out. And that's what Jesus called them in the anatomy of these wills. You are therefore your own God. Go ahead and be that. Because there's a higher word than Dea. There's a higher word than God that I know of, and you do not know, Pharisees, but I'm not going to tell you. You see, Jesus is saying you've disenfranchised yourself from something so eternal, something so holy, something so infinite, and you, with your own participation, with your own limited resources, you shoot from there. The Latins call it the jactare. And I can say that it does have a very dark connotation to it that I won't say here on film. They call them the far darters. Remember Cupid? He shot the arrow of lust, Eros. He was called boy Eros. The Cupid. Cupidity means Eros. It means erotic nature. He wanted that. I will shoot her with this love arrow, and then she will be filled with lust. It's objectivism. I want that. I want that. And that was his job. You see him as Adonis and his mother Madonna. 300 years in image of sculpture and painting prior to the Christ figure. This is paganism. They knew it too well. But isn't it interesting that paganism does foreshadow the Christ figure to come? We'll read Virgil's Georgics, I think it's around 60 BC, discussing about the child that would be born of the Virgin that will save us all. 60 years before the Christ was ever incarnated by a pagan poet writing in his Georgics. It was of agriculture. They were looking for the agricultural god. That was what the Sumerians were looking for, and the Babylonians were. So, I know, I'm going to wrap it up. Okay? Ananke, you have followed your own desire of Esrei or Eros into this desired object, the direct object of your passions, of your desire, and you've forfeited the greater I, the greater will of God that would have hit the mark and made a clean shot and made you commit to the marriage of the competition, the game. Fulfilling your nature as of fulfillment, fulfilling the job completely. We'd rather have what we're happy with now because we followed a preceding action that was rushed upon us, and we become satisfied and we became fed up, filled up. Isn't that interesting how the words went satisfied and sad? And look at that sine wave. I want, I get, because I'm out today. I want, I get. I want, I get. Does that look like anything to you? How about bipolar? Two poles. We can take medication. Some people need it because they're bipolar, but there's still a straight line regardless. Okay, that's it. So that's it for today. The anatomy of the will, if you will. And I'm Kyle Jones once again. This is February 6, 2015, I think. Yep. Okay. God bless you guys in Christ. Last little tidbit of information. I'd like you to see how God uses terms that will be fulfilled later in the Greek analysis of words. And the Greek analysis of etymology given by some of the highest minds of all time, if you will, ingenious minds, say such as Plato, Aristotle. But I've been doing a lot of study with the pictographic nature, forms of the Hebrew. Jeff Benner's work on the origins of the Hebrew characters, and come to find out that it's a lot older a lot older script than the wedge shape, kind of the square shape Hebrew. We're discussing the toxon, shooting the arrow hits the mark, the molestai, right? There's your toxon. There's the shot that preceded him. He participates in the bole, the will that hits the mark. How do we even say free will? I don't know. It doesn't even make sense now. I have free will. Are you kidding? It doesn't. He's free from hitting the miss, and he's bound to hitting the mark because he's in the free. The word free is where you get the word Freya from, or Fraulein. But the word Freya, an old Germanic word, it means wife. It means the endeared one, endeared wife. Mein Fraulein, my Frau, mon Frau, my Frey. The Czechoslovakian, Brejatelli, Ra, there's your free. Brejatelli. My endeared one, my beautiful wife, my loved one, my adorned one, the one I've joined myself to. That's the word free. So therefore I'm joined to you. I am gamos. Remember the word for marriage, gamos, joined. Remember the same etymology. It's right there. Jaga, nama, nasal, guttural. I am joined to my dear beloved wife, and gamos, holy matrimony, in diakasune to hit that mark. These work together. These words work together. And in that sense, I hit the mark. Watch this. This is an ancient word. Kaseth was used as the root for archer. It meant bow, but it meant the forms, it was used in the forms of expressing who the archer was. The bowman. Kaseth. I won't need to go into the letters. This Kaseth was a bow, and I want to make sure I didn't screw this one up because the Colt. Yep, I love that one. I don't know why that eluded me for a second. Now watch this one. It's so cool. That's the Ka sound. We read right to left. Right to left. Ka. There's your Ka. I'm going to come back and explain this. This is your Sha sound or your Sa sound. In this case it's Sa. And then the Ka, TH sound. Okay? Kaseth is the word for it. Ka-seth. This is Hebrew now. The words that God used, and I believe in the pictographic language, express the word itself. Each letter going to each word. Watch this one. This meant the point of horizon, the bow. I'm reading right to left. So the bow is going this way. That's a picture of the horizon, when the sun hits the horizon. Sha means when the teeth hit, when they bite. When the teeth bite, and that's the mark, the signal. That is the mark, the bullseye, if you will. The bullseye, or it really doesn't mean the signal. I'm going to say the bullseye, but it is called the signal or the mark. It's your bullseye. As the bow is pulled at the event horizon of it, aimed, it bites its teeth into the mark. That's the word for bow, bowman, kaseth. Isn't that beautiful how that a Hebrew word that God would create, the letters commit to the word commits to the letters. That's it.